from PRX.
Friends beyond the binary, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome. This is a classic episode of Sleep With Me 2025. We're trying to put out an extra episode a week, most weeks, to keep you company in the deep dark night, right? This is episode 368. It's about a ventriloquist friend. So it's a little bit looser episode. I don't know if we'd use the term DUMMY. Even we're talking about a ventriloquist friend, what we do in this episode, there'll probably be, I don't know how you could talk about those things without it being a little bit PG-13, because, but I hope you enjoy this one. It's extra. If you're looking for a regular episode of Sleep With Me, still come out twice a week. This is a bonus episode, to carry you through the week, because we appreciate you listening to the show. And if you need extras or you wanted to peek at the past, that's what we're here to do. So I hope you enjoy it. Thanks for listening. All right, everybody, it's time to talk about tonight's sponsor, Helix Sleep. And I do not know what you're waiting for. If you listen to the show, I really feel like I should hear from almost every single listener. Have you taken that Helix Sleep quiz, and which mattress did you get matched with? Because it's going to fit you and your sleep needs, just like my Helix fits mine. I love my Helix mattress. When I took the quiz a long, long time ago, wonderful long relationship I've had with my Helix. When I took that quiz, I wanted something where I could sleep on my side, I could sleep on my stomach. I don't want to get hot and stuffy. I got matched with the Helix Dusk. I picked the Helix Dusk Luxe. And night after night, that is what allows me to be here for you, is the good rest I get in my Helix mattress. So I'm happy with my Helix. Which Helix are you going to be happy with, right? Like, what are you sleeping in right now? Is it made for you and how you sleep? Did you and your partner take a quiz like the Helix quiz together and say, yeah, that's the one for us? Because you could do that right now with the Helix quiz. And then the mattress could come straight to your door, shipped free of charge, ready to go, and you could start your long-term relationship with a mattress that's there for you and how you sleep, what you prefer. Think about how much better you're going to be sleeping in that situation. And Helix always has a great deal, so get over there. Go to helixsleep.com/sleep for 20% off site-wide. That's helixsleep.com/sleep for 20% off site-wide. helixsleep.com/sleep. Thanks, everybody. Sleep With Me podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are the things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states or situations. All right, but we're trying this new thing called No Stone Unturned, where I'm going through these testimonials from real listeners who benefit from the show and looking at, hey, I know I benefit from the show. I know it makes my life better, but there was this one thing standing in my way of supporting it directly. So if this is the thing standing in your way, listen up. If you can afford to support the show, it makes your life better. If you rely on the show relies on you. All right, this is a good one. It came from Jennings because it had something I didn't even realize gets in the way of some people supporting the show. I love falling asleep, the friendly voice in the deep dark night with no expectations. And despite the apparently lackadaisical rambling nature of each episode, you clearly put in a lot of effort, and I want to support that and keep bringing you to the world's deep dark night. Your podcast is definitely worth paying for, but I don't like subscriptions. How often have I ended up paying for a subscription and not using it? Too many times. And that was my biggest obstacle in subscribing. Another consideration I had to overcome was the belief that you were probably getting supported by some big grant and didn't need my contribution so much. Now I understand there is no such grant. That's it for the support of the show. It's mainly listener support. We don't get any grants. We don't have any funding. And our sponsors only support us based on listener support back. That's how we're able to be here for you is listeners like Jennings. So if you identify with what Jennings said, if Sleep With Me makes your life better, don't wait. Support the show. And I'm pretty proud of the work I put into the main show that comes out night after night after night. So please support the show. sleepwithmepodcast.com/plus. Thanks, Jennings. Oh, Mystery Bard. A lot of people help out in this show. Who are they?
Chris Posty Poster Son sounds like an earful. Wrote the theme song. Edits episodes too. Carl W. the Legend. Also edits episodes. Ashley, Kenny, Scotty, Jennifer. Runner. Eric and the team at Astound or on the website. I am the Mystery Bard. I do the lullabies, yeah. I do commissions at jonathanmann.net. I'll write a song for you. Any reason at all. You can tell me the story and I'll make it personal. You see the kindness shine straight on through when the listeners form their own Facebook group. Keith, Stacy, Sarah, Julie, and Jennifer. These are your moderators. Get support dear Scooter on Patreon. Buy the merch and support the sponsors. You can find anything you want at sleepwithmepodcast.com. And we're so proud that we could dance. Rusty Biscuit, Lois, Anna like banana. Leah does the transcripts.
Thanks, Mystery Bard. And don't forget, the most comfortable way to listen to Sleep With Me is with sleep phones. You can get Sleep With Me merch, Sleep With Me branded sleep phones at sleepwithmepodcast.com/sleep-phones. And use Sleep With Me at checkout to get $5 off your order. The only way you can get the Sleep With Me merch editions is sleepwithmepodcast.com/sleep-phones. Thanks, everybody. What do you say we slow it down and get on with the show? Hey, you up all night tossing, turning, mind racing, trouble getting to sleep, trouble falling asleep? Well, welcome. This is Sleep With Me, the podcast that's here to put you to sleep. We do it, the bedtime story. All you need to do is get in bed, turn out the lights and press play. I'm going to do the rest. And what I'm going to do is carve out a little safe place here where you can set aside whatever's been keeping you awake, whether it's a racing mind, pain in the body, pain in the, whatever, emotional turmoil, tumult, travel, any of the terrible T's that especially the ones I don't remember, anything that's bothering you, distracting you, noises, irritating, whatever it is, I'm going to try to take your mind off of that. What I'm going to do is send my voice and my intention to put you asleep, or my best intention, whatever it is, across the deep, dark night. In some sense, I'm going to try to keep you company, auditory company. I'm going to be like a friend coming over to just tell you a bedtime story, take your mind off of stuff, and you can fall asleep whenever you want. I'll let myself out. And since I'm just, the sleep timer will do that for you. But the whole idea of this podcast is that you listen to me, and instead that you can't think of two things at once or three things at once. I guess this is like controversial to my brain bots, because they say, well, you can't say that, you don't have any. So, they always want to start up trouble. But I said, well, I'm pretty sure if you listen to me instead of thinking or listening to your brain bots, that's what I call them, all those bedtime thoughts. I'll just be here rambling. I'm going to use lulling, soothing tones, pointless meanders, plane drifting, stuff like that. I don't even know what those are called. It's like an interrupted pregnant pause. We now interrupt this pregnant pause for Scooter to make an unidentifiable, pregnant pause is interrupted by unidentifiable noises. Coming out of doubt, confusion, or uncomfortableness, like that's doubt right there. That's just I can't say, I don't think I can fake the uncomfortableness one. So let me just tune right into my, let me be present in the moment, and then I'll be, yeah, there you go. That's uncomfortableness. Not a reach for me to get a dose of authentic uncomfortableness. But see, we can laugh at these things because if we're together, even if it's in some strange digital, whatever. I don't know. I wanted to say Walter Mitty, but I meant the other guy that actually, Marshall McLuhan. And, obviously, if you have a decent intelligence, you should say, okay, this guy, obviously, we're not dealing with a professor here because he's getting Walter Mitty and Marshall McLuhan mixed up. Though I would posit this, and if you'll give me a little leeway here, if there is an afterlife in which fictional characters and real-life people could exist, I would say that there is a chance. Excuse me, Marshall McLuhan's biographer's trying to get in here. Excuse me, sir, it says closed set for a reason. I would posit, despite the objections of biographers, that Marshall McLuhan and Walter Mitty would probably hit it off. And you say, well, what about James Thurber? I'd say, well, why you got to go ruin my attempt at a metaphor? You just blew it. I said, no, it doesn't work. Because I said, I don't know. Because I said, I didn't read it. I started James Thurber's metaphor. No, his autobiography. I say, okay, this is a guy that gets metaphors and biographies and autobiography. And I say, quick, Scoots, just sit down here. Let me help you through the rest of this intro. I just want to do a little Sir Davos level truth telling. You know that biographies and autobiographies aren't metaphorical, right? That they're true stories. No, I was trying to say if there's an afterlife where fiction, did you hear that when I said that I think Marshall McLuhan and Walter Mitty could be good friends? And then you actually, autobiographer brain. Oh no, autobiographer career. What are you again? You're the critical, biographer watchdog. Well, geez, that's a great name for a brain part. And what is it? What's your role? Criticism. Okay, got that. So I have a part of my brain dedicated to just sort of hurling critical asides at me when I misspeak around biographies or autobiographies. Yes. Okay, do you mind me take it? Because I gave you a little. Oh no, I was the one that asked for the leeway. Who just said that? Oh, I did not until this opening. I never knew I had any watchdogs in my brain, but now I got a biographical watchdog. I got a leeway watchdog, and I can't get any leeway around autobiographies or biographies. But I say, hey, you two, I'm about to tell a little bedtime story for brain parts. You believe that? And after a while, you'll be saying, who let the watchdogs out? Okay, they're not buying it yet, but I'll win them over. Because I was just going to spin a great point before that, what was that, a sides watchdog? I forgot what I was going to say. Okay, Walter Mitty and McLuhan might be friends. I think I was trying to say something else, but she kind of threw me off. That's fine, though. I'm sure it wasn't a brilliant point. It's just a distracting point to say, well, what would you prefer to think about at bedtime? Even you watchdogs, because I know being a watchdog, once you take on that title, it comes with a certain level of, cortisol production. Believe me. They say I've had Exxon give me a scan because they say, they're looking, that's the next thing. It's Exxon. We're one step ahead of a science fiction. I think that's their new slogan. But they said to me, one day we may need to mine cortisol. So they said, we've heard about your cortisol levels. I think that's the stress hormone. Hopefully it is. I guess I don't have a hormone watchdog. That watchdog gave up it was overwhelmed. It barked and ran away. But anyway, they said, we might need your cortisol reserves. And I patted that executive on the back. I said, I wish they were reserves. They're all in use, unfortunately. But that's why I do a bedtime story podcast. I guess my thought was, okay, so now I got a couple watchdogs. I got an oil company executive in here looking to, buy my, I know you're here to just get my cortisol reserves on it, at a penny a dollar or whatever. But which would you prefer to think about at bedtime? Walter Mitty and Marshall McLuhan, as you imagine them, walking hand in hand across, purple fields of flowers or something. talking about the media, and maybe they would even be, they could analyze what they say, McClellan, and be like, this is obscene, this is, and they say, and then he'd say, he'd confuse me, and I think, therefore, Walter may say, the medium's the message. I say, I don't equate. I said, is this podcast a pretty good example of that? Or does it refute that? And then they both crack up and then just, because they're in the afterlife anyway. They don't even care. On top of that, as has been pointed out, Walter Mitty's fictional. So that's who does this podcast. I think that's a pretty good example of what makes me qualified to take your mind off stuff. And it's not going to work for everybody, clearly. I'm a man who spends too much time thinking about stuff that doesn't make any sense. That's my hobby. And, I've decided to try to put it turns out we were talking about stuff like that. I do it all the time. I say, geez, what do you think would Walter Mitty and McLuhan take a tandem bicycle? Yeah, the answer is yes. The debate would be who goes in the front, who goes in the back, And then, of course, Walter Serber, James Serber might need, he might be alone in the deep dark. He might need my podcast. So there you go. It comes back around full circle. Because my podcast, if you're straining to fall asleep, if you're struggling to fall asleep, and you find that you need something to distract you, something that's a little bit silly, but that you don't really have to engage in. It's almost background noise, but it has just enough substance to catch your attention so that you don't get caught up in all that personal. They say, well, why do you spend so much time thinking about Marshall McLuhan when you never even read, why don't you sit down and read some of his books? And he said, well, I'm going to bed. And I said, oh, it's typical quitter. So if you have any brain parts like that, I want to take your mind off of it, okay? And I'll take the heat, I'll take the watchdogs. I'll take on those. I'll just try to use this pleasant tone. Oh, how I love these watchdogs, keeping an eye on all of us, doing their best, because that's all they can do. So I want to distract you from all that. I'm going to tell you little silly stories and analyze the show and go on tangents and take my time getting there. But the main message of the show is I'm glad you're here. If you're skeptical, if you're not sure, I hope the show works for you. I hope it can take your mind off of stuff and put you to sleep. It doesn't work for everybody, but I hope it helps you out. So I'm glad you're here. Thanks for stopping by. I really hope I can help you fall asleep. All right, everybody, this is Scoots here. This is a particular message. I'm going to be reading a testimonial from somebody who supports the show directly. This message is only for people that, you get a lot out of the podcast. You listen to it 2 or more times a week. If you listen all night long, or you listen to like 10 episodes a month, 12 episodes a month, you're the one I'm trying to get the message to. If you can afford to support the show, if you lean on the podcast, if it makes your life better, listen close to this testimonial and see if you identify with anything this listener said. Because this is how we're able to be here for you. If you count on the podcast, we really do count on you to support the show back, but only if you're able to, and the podcast makes your life better. If it's a part of your life, I'd love it if you'd be a part of the life of the podcast, because that's how we're able to be here for you. All right, this comes from Sarah, who said, sleep with me helped me get better sleep and get out of my head when I was dealing with a lot of thinking. It's a way more valuable tool in my life than things I pay money for. Plus, I feel like Scooter's a friend in the deep, dark night. I mean, it seems wild, though, to pay for something that's free. Like, really, I could keep using the free version, right? But honestly, I wanted a better experience with story-only shows. I want to be able to skip the intro, not have a change in pace, not have the singing or the ads. And really, I can tell how much thought and support and personal commitment Scooter makes, and I want to support that. So, yeah, if you identify with what Sarah said, think about supporting the show back. But that's all it comes down to. Is sleeping me a part of your regular life? Does it make your life better? Are you listening to me right now? Are you hearing what I'm saying? And can you do so? Are you willing to support something back? that supports you and your well-being? Are you that rebellious to overcome whatever's in the way and say, yeah, this makes my life better. I want it to be here. If that's true for you, don't wait. Support the show right now at sleepwithmepodcast.com/plus. All right, so it's time for another Trending Twitter Tuesday. And this is one where I guess this is like where I climb on my own. I don't know if this is going to be umbrage or I don't think it's a tangent. Let me just get these trends. We've been using cities in the United States that start with M. Let's see where else we can find here. Let's try Cardiff. Because why not? You know, and actually, believe it or not, it's just the close of, I guess it might be after 12 p.m. and Mother's Day in the UK. So happy Mother's Day to all the mothers in UK. Mother's Day in the UK. That is one phrase that's easy to say. So all you mothers, yay, yay, yay. And what could be more, I guess more, I don't know, I got something that came up for me. And every once in a while, I talk about the story swamp. So maybe I'll talk about the story swamp for a little. Any new people, they might say, hey, do you have a lot of questions sometimes come up like, where do you get the ideas for the show? Oh, no, that's usually when they're checking me in. That's an intake form. But I think it also comes out to say, and I always say the story swamp. So if you're new and you don't know what the story swamp is, and this might sound like it's something I'm joking about, but in this sense, I'm not joking. And this is when the show is, and it doesn't happen often or all the time, that the show is, I guess, people talk about being in a flow state or a state of flow, and I don't know if that's so optimistic and sounds so pleasurable, which I may have come across a few times, but for the most part, I think the podcast sometimes when I'm doing the Trending Twitter Tuesday, sometimes stuff will surprise me, and sometimes the story ideas come out of nowhere, and I'm not making them up. And I don't have a great explanation for where the story ideas come from, but where it feels like they come from. This is how it feels from my end. Not all the time. Some of the stories we do are often notes. Some of them are written. And some of them have a preconceived idea of something that's bothering me or something like tonight. But then if I go in and I can stay calm, if I can put my internal critic and anxieties to rest or stay calm, which is, I think, one of the things that makes the podcast work overall. If I can do that and kind of stay at ease, then ideally, what was my point? I can get into the story swamp. And where the story swamp is, it's not always swampy. But like a swamp, it's, is loamy a right word? I think it is, a loamy. A bit like a Dagobah. But like it's got mist that can change and other stuff. So I'll go into the story swamp and then I'll take a look, turn around a bend and I'll see a tree. I'll say, what's in that side, that tree there? And I'll look in and then I'll say, oh, what? That's this story part. And I'll take a look at it and I'll say, oh, that's a mechanical dragon, let's just say, because that was in a story a while back. And then I'll say, okay, and then you just talk about the mechanical, and then I say, okay, that fits right in with the story, right where we needed it. So it's not like I'm always imagining this stuff or thinking it up, and I don't know whence the story swamp came and whence it'll return. And I only know that I can't just go into the story swamp when I feel like I have to be calm and stuff like that. But a lot of the story ideas, they just come out of the story swamp. I can't claim that I'm coming up with all this stuff. And for me, the story swamp takes great courage to even go into, because it's like, I'm full of doubt, It just, I say, well, this story's never going to work out. And then the story swamp says, well, I'm full of loamy story stuff. Come on in. Have I ever let you down, or, is it just fear? And I say, I don't know, I'm too scared to find out, Story Swamp. I said, well, if you need any story help, just come on into the Story Swamp. I'm always ready to help you story it up with, but you gotta, it's got a little dreamlike. It's not perfect. So that's where the Story Swamp is. And then sometimes I say these Trending 22s, I say I have an idea that's on my mind, but it's not a story there. So that's like tonight. And I guess there was a couple of things that got me thinking about ventriloquists, right? Because, okay, another metaphor. So this could be, this will be a tangent. But one thing I was wondering, and this I guess people might find funny, and I'm always trying to talk about like that. When I sit down to do the podcast, like, I don't know, it's not like I say, oh, I'm going to become like Drew, who's the producer of the podcast and who I am in my day-to-day life. It's not like I sit down to do the podcast and I snap my fingers and I say, scooter time. Yeah, I wish I did that because that would be pretty cool. And I like kick up my feet and then boom, I take on this calmer demeanor. It's like I go to a place just like the Story Swamp. It's not I guess it's the Scooter Swamp, but that you can't use a double thing like that. But so I sit down to do the podcast and it helps if I'm in this tiny back of this non-walk-in closet, this climbing closet I'm in, because I'm in a little tight packed, a little bit like, it's not like womb-like, but it's like being in I guess it's kid-like. It's like I'm shrunken down and I'm in a cardboard box. And that's a pretty sweet spot to go into, imagination land. But I also go to this place. He said, is that what happens? Like, because it's not like I change my voice when I do the podcast. I just become, and I'm not an actor, so I don't know if this is method actor. Like I said, I'm just Scooter. Like, I don't know how else to tell you, doctor. And then they say, well, they say he's really only, he's harmless unless, and I say, thank you. Like, once again, I've proven I'm perfectly harmless. And you always say that in front of the nurse that I have a crush on. Thank you for that as well, doctor, because she always giggles when you say he's perfectly harmless, and I know that kills all the vibes, so thanks again. I'll be going. And it's also my friend who I say, can you give me an exam in front? I have a crush on that. And they said, not again, they say one more, I could just give me one more chance with her, please. But anyway, I got distracted there. But I don't sit down and there's not like Scooter is kind of like a place I go or maybe but then I was thinking of again, I was thinking about this ventriloquist dummy because it had come up in a story a couple weeks ago. How I had because I was like, oh, it's Bobby Finger, the first person that ever interviewed me in my whole life. And then I said, well, I had that contact at the Fireman's Field Days with the weatherman. I don't think he was a weatherman, but I don't know his thing. His role. Maybe he was the station comedy guy, because I don't know if Syracuse was big enough to have a station comedy guy. Like, there's a dramatic movie, and again, if I ever make one, that the morning news comedy guy. Anyway, where was I? Oh, so I had talked to that guy, and he was I think that's what it's called, a ventriloquist dummy, right? And I can hear every ventriloquist dummy in the world talking. But then I was like, is Scooter and Drew, is that like, this will leave me open for a lot of jokes, but I was like, is that am I a ventriloquist dummy? And then it's like, obviously, well, who's hanging, oh boy, I don't want to get, especially when it involves myself. Be like, get your hand out. So, okay, so that we don't want to go down that road. But so I was thinking about this interaction with this guy because he had a ventriloquist dummy. And I was thinking, like, I guess maybe I had a forlorn urge to own my own ventriloquist. I don't like that term either. It's a very derogatory term, but these are, for the most part, these guys are portrayed as nasty characters. These ventriloquist dummies are mostly jerks, let's be honest, or at least their portrayal in the media. And that's their positive, like that's their best thing. Cause then, they can shade into more things where, like people just don't trust them. And that also goes for kid-sized dolls, as we've seen. And I think that all stems back from my buddy, who was this life-size, he wasn't quite a life-size kid doll when I was little. And my brother Ken, I think it was Ken, maybe it was Ted, he wanted a My Buddy. And again, this is when you don't get jokes as a kid. And, we had 6 kids in our house, so rarely, I mean, we were still spoiled brats, but, usually you wouldn't get the My Buddy. That was the brand name. You'd get the other doll. But whichever doll my brother got, it was like My Buddy. It was a big, like another boy. It was supposed to be your best friend. I think even, what's his name, did some comedy about it. I don't know. I can't think of it right now. But my brother, he said, what's the brand of that doll? My dad kept calling it Kerosene Ken. And the doll reeked of kerosene, even though it wasn't soaked. It's like whatever it was made from. It was like a kerosene-based plastic, and its clothes. It was definitely this doll was not certified, whatever. This was pre-safety standards, or else they, said, safety standards. To say it's made in the USA with safety standards, we just have to ship it there and ship it back. Don't worry. So I never got that joke till later. I said, oh, it's because the doll smelled like it was about to burst into flames that they called it that. But at some point, at least child-sized dolls, and I guess throughout time, the ventriloquist dummy, maybe it goes back to Punch and Judy, who I love so. I love that genre. Way more, I mean, no offense to ventriloquist dummies, but I do prefer, I just like that biting humor of Punch and Judy and the absurdity and almost hopelessness. And oh boy, I love Punch and Judy. And I think I've pitched Tim Burton on this, and I know Tim Burton won't be listening at 28 minutes into this podcast he doesn't listen to. And I don't think anyone that could get a hold of Tim Burton, John August, I don't know, Johnny Depp, obviously Tim Curry is who I pitched it for. But let's make a frickin' Punch and Judy movie. I mean, and Punch and Judy could just be the B, the surreal part, but in the Punch and, obviously, I would like to see Tim Curry play, the puppeteer. But we could get someone else, like Martin Freeman, maybe. I don't know. We could, I could work with Martin Freeman in my imagination. But anyway, I guess I was thinking, I said to myself, and I can picture exactly where I was. I was on the shuttle bus I take to go through the tunnel that connects the island I live on. I live on this tiny island, and it goes through a tunnel to downtown Oakland. And right as we were about to go into the tunnel, those ventriloquist dummy just jumped in my head, the words, and then I started thinking about ventriloquist dummies. And I said, and then I said, well, am I a ventriloquist dummy? And then it was like I was in an act and I didn't have any control, Or I said, yes, you are. That whole thing. And I said, why are all of them so mean? So mean-spirited. And also my daughter's reading Goosebumps, which has, and I haven't read those books, so I don't know the plot. But I said to myself, on behalf, I said, and I shouted this on the bus, on my knees with my hand. I said, are there any good ventriloquist dummies in the world? And everyone on the bus said, because the bus is loud, and they do that a lot. So they say, what? And I said, that is a mouthful. I wish there was another term for ventriloquist. I said, ventriloquist buddy, why? And then I said, talking buddy, no. And I thought, maybe this is my quest to revitalize. And I guess, so you got that one comedian who goes around, Jeff Dunham, I think his name is. He's really rich and famous. He's done so well for himself. I think that's his name. And he's a puppeteer. And I think there'd probably be, this is more vaudevillian. They could, where Jeff Dunham's like, he's kind of like, I don't know. I'm not familiar with this humor, to be honest. So I don't know if it's GPG or R humor. I'm guessing my impression is that it's G, it's family friendly, and that's great because it's been great for him. And then we lamb chop. Was lamb chop nice? I forget. Sherry something was the one that did lamb chop. But again, that's a puppet. So we're not talking about puppets here. I can't fix everything. Okay. But I thought to myself, geez, is there, because I said, I'd like to tell a ventriloquist dummy story. And then one part of my brain said, well, why don't you just talk about thinking about ventriloquist dummies for 18 to 19 minutes? And I said, that I can handle. Let's do that for sure. But then maybe we could still figure out a story about ventriloquist dummies. And I said, this was on the bus. So to go back to us, I said, that popped in my head. Am I like ventriloquist dummies, a word, words, then am I one? Then I said, well, I'd like to tell that. And they said, well, it's too many pitfalls, because where are you going to go with it? That, it always, and I said, you're right. I can't, could I tell a sleepy story? And they say, well, yeah, it couldn't, definitely a ventriloquist dummy could not do this job. So let me just put that out of your minds, ventriloquists and ventriloquist dummies. No one, even I cannot recoup your reputation enough to say, oh, yeah, just sit that ventriloquist dummy in the room with my child and let it talk my child right to sleep. Even the most detached and, parent wouldn't, your reputation can only be so this would be just one story to start with, And so I said, well, yeah, so you're telling me you want to do a story of redemption for and I said, well, I don't know what story I want to do. And then I got off the bus. And so I said, did you just shout out, are there any, I said Vic's running. I don't know, silent runnings or cool runnings left in the world. And he said, I seen him at the 99-cent store. And so then I went and bought Cool Runnings on DVD. So that was good. But yeah, I was thinking like where would a ventriloquist dummy start? Like, would it start with the dummy or the ventriloquists? And then, it's tough when you have a peanut gallery in your brain of ventriloquist. Say, well, it starts with the dummy, the ventriloquist dummy. And I say, thank you for your material that's only been used 5,000 times in the Borscht Belt and, wherever else ventriloquist dummies can be found nowadays. But I said, there's got to be, I get it. There's got to be people out there rebooting. If not, please. I guess it would be a life of pain and, to try to there's got to be some people out there working some new material. Like I said, I love those kind of circus things. They say ventriloquist dummies do not belong in circuses. And they'd say, well, what about in the mouth of a tiger? And then, so I said, okay. And they said, well, that, I said, well, what if it's an illusion? And that's actually where our story starts. It was this new circus called the Purple. They thought originally it was called the Purpose World Tour Circus, but then they changed the name to Purple People's Players, the Purple People Circus, I think, or the Purple People Circus, the Triple P Circus. Triple, what do they call that? The 3 rings. And they had these beautiful, beautiful purple tents. And this was like going to be this was this new circus, and it was trying to find a way. They said, okay, well, how can we not look like we're a crappy circus that exploits animals, or the circus that just shows up for a little while, and then you're driving, commuting, your kid sees it, and then you have to take him out of guilt circus. Those are 2 types. And again, send all the complaints to Story Swamp, because I got nothing against any circuses, believe me. Or any complaints about that, send to the Story Swamp, because maybe I do have complaints, I don't know. or Cirque du Soleil, which is, higher end. And they kind of got they got also the higher end and the, I don't think they are the only artistic circus, but, they kind of got it, where you'd have to find a new way of doing it, that's understandable and has, an actual plot line. And again, those complaints. I don't know that I've seen a Cirque du Soleil show because I'm not a billionaire. So, okay, and that'll be the end of the Cirque du Soleil comedy hour. That just cost me my entire podcast, from the lawsuit, impending lawsuits. But this circus, the Purple People's Circus, the Triple P Circus, is it would become whatever the proper pronunciations are. Purple People's, what is it? The Purple People's Playhouse pronunciations are preposterous anyway. So they were like, okay, they were like, how do we find our way? And this guy that ran it, he called himself, and I guess this, might offend, he called himself Mr. England. And Mr. England, and it was a show name, but he was an Englishman. And it was his quest to find a circus. He said there's got to be a market for this, like the $20 range, maybe the $10 matinee. And then people, the ticket price aside, that's too boring. But he was trying to find a circus that costs about the same, maybe a little bit more than a movie, but offered, double the entertainment value, which isn't easy, because I just saw a kids movie this weekend. It was really good. But so they had tried under the Purpose World Tour, where they tried to kind of make a circus about, which kind of like a social, not totally a social justice circus, but, like where they were kind of anti-wrangling, not anti, but, trying to be a contrast, and then trying to be more focused than artistic, and it just didn't work out. I think mostly just they got on the bad side of a bunch of these bloggers, and I don't know. But then so he started trying to search the world for entertaining things for this Purple People's Circus. And he said, you can remember it like it was St. David's Day, like it was yesterday. And I think he was praying to St. David, who I'm not familiar with, to be honest, saying, come on, I want to bring affordable but profitable circus joy to the children of the world. And then he saw this street busker, like he was walking the streets of London, I think it was London. And he was down, he was praying, to St. David while he's walking with his head down. And then he heard this roar, this lion's roar from around the corner. And it sounded very real, bass heavy. And he said, what? And then he heard squeals of children and adults. And he said, whoa, what? And there's another huge roar. And they heard this gasp. And then he summoned his courage, because he said, well, I'm supposed to be Mr. England. I mean, mostly in the U.S. was when he said, clearly, and you're not going to walk around London calling yourself Mr. England unless you're a total buffoon, which he actually was too, but he wouldn't dare do that there. But anyway, he runs around the corner because he said, maybe I could help or at least find out what's going on. And he sees this crowd gathered. Right as he rounds the corner, the crowd starts to cheer, yay, yay, and clap. And he waits. He says, well, that's a happy crowd. That's like a circus, a circus, blue sky circus guy. And so he waits, and then the crowd starts to part, and he's like, what? And then he's like, oh, this is one of the great squares in London or any major city that has good quality buskers. And then, that's where, and he was like, oh, why didn't I think? He goes, of course, I should have come here to find, exploitable talent for my circus. And then someone said, you're the fool that calls yourself Mr. England. And he said, not here. And he goes, well, I've been to Kansas, Just because you're in Kansas doesn't give you the right to call yourself Mr. And he said, well, did you learn anything at my circus? And he goes, I learned you dislike wrangling. And he said, all right, I don't have time to argue. I'm trying to. He goes, what was going on there? He goes, oh, it's a wonderful show. Wonderful, wonderful show. And then he sees the crowd. He sees this woman, and she's kind of picking up some dollars that had fallen out of this hat. And then he sees this box with the doors closed. He goes, is this where the lion was? He was thinking that at first. And he sees it sitting in this chair next to, dressed in a lion tamer's outfit, is the top half of a ventriloquist dummy. And he says, oh, well, that's interesting. And then he says, oh, what? And he goes, was there a lion? And he goes, okay, let me make my move here. He goes, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Was there a lion here? I heard a lion roaring. And the woman looks at him and she goes, next show, the greatest show in the history of Europe and all of London. It'll be up in top of the 2 o'clock hour. Something, I don't know. I don't do the greatest imitations, but he says, well, is there a lion in this show? And then he hears like the ventriloquist dummy giggle. And she says, what's so funny? And he goes, I'd be lying. He goes, there's so many good. This is the dummy says this. But his mouth doesn't move. But she was throwing her voice. I'll just ruin that for you. And he goes, I'd be lying. He was making some joke about lying. I don't know. I dropped that joke by accident. That was a joke fumble. But so Mr. England, he says, okay, well, can I sit here and wait for the show to start? Do you mind? And she goes, well, I was just she goes, yeah, can you keep an eye on my stuff? And he goes, so you're going to trust me with your box and your dummy? And then the dummy goes, I'm no dummy. And then he giggled, Mr. England. He couldn't believe how good her voice throwing was. And he goes, did you learn that out of the back of a comic magazine? And she goes, well, no, she goes, I did order that one. But she goes, no. I went to the MUFC. And he goes, MUFC, what's that stand for? She goes, it's a secret society. And she goes, can you keep an eye on my stuff? Can I trust you? And he says, I could trust you. You could trust me. And she goes, I didn't. And he goes, don't worry. I'm not going to take anything. I just want to see the show. I'm a showman myself. And she goes, well, this here's Adam Scott. She pointed at the dummy. And she goes, I'm Martha Mark Lawrenson. And she goes, I'm just going to go give me a tea. You want anything? And he goes, no. And so then he sits down and he looks at the dummy. He wasn't paying a lot. He was looking at the box and he was trying to figure out where the lion. And he was like, okay, maybe there's a lion in the box, not a real lion. And then the ventriloquist dummy, the figure, just his top half, says, what are you, looking for the lion? And he's shocked. But the thing's, its lips didn't move, but it was clearly the noise was coming from the dummy, or, the figure, Adam, we'll call him Adam. And he goes, how come you have a name like a famous actor? And he said, well, she has a huge crush on him. So she said, she named him, we're best friends. And then the guy goes, I guess I'm actually a little jealous of that guy. And he goes, well, it's understandable. He's very successful, so... but Martha's the best, so you'll be fine. And he said, excuse me, but do you mind if I ask where your bottom half is? And the dummy says, well, what do you mean my bottom half? He goes, well, you only have a top half, you don't have a bottom half. And he goes, oh, boy. He goes, the lion still got it. He goes, the lion ate it. I'd be lying if he just started laughing. He said, I'm sorry, I love these. And he said, the dummy said this, Adam, he said, you're still staring at me. What in the Lakers are you staring at me about? And Mr. England said, what? And he goes, we're from the land, he goes, we've been in Minnesota a long time, the land of the lakes. And Mr. England said, I thought I traveled. Are you sure that's not the Golden Gopher State? And then the dummy just like said, it doesn't matter. He goes, I just thought that. He goes, why are you staring at me? And Mr. England said, well, first of all, it's confusing because I'm talking to you, Adam. And you're talking back, maybe your lips aren't moving. And he said, well, I'm missing my bottom half, man. You know, like, how, you know, because I'm lucky I can even talk to you. And then he laughed again. And then Mr. England seemed further taken aback, and Adam said to him, well, why you seem further taken aback? He goes, is there something I'm doing? And he goes, listen, mate, I just am wondering, because most of these dummies, he goes, you don't got any attitude or any sass. He goes, is this what you're like on break? And he goes, no, I'm so over sass, man. He goes, he goes, you know how much cortisol released? Because you think me and Martha got time to go around insulting each other when we're out here trying to make a buck busking. And he goes, the world's got enough bitter ventriloquist dummies. It's full of them. And then he goes, and then there's the dolls. And I say, you know. And then they both laughed at that. And then Mr. England said, you know what, Adam, I'm Barry, by the way. Nice to meet you. And he said, nice to meet you. And then, you know, Barry, Mr. England, he said he didn't know whether to shake the dummy's hand or whatever. And then the dummy said, you mind getting my bottom half out of the front of that box? You know, can you open that box and get him? It's right in there. And then Barry said, well, I'm supposed to watch everything. I don't know. I'm still not sure if I, you know. And he said, just go in there and just open it. He goes, see that flap right there? He goes, right where it says pull here. And then Barry said, it says don't pull here. And he said, yeah, just pull there. And he goes, my inside, you know, my bottom half is right in there. My waist down. And so then Barry was like, kind of like, I don't know, Adam. I don't want Martha to get mad at me. And he was looking around the square. He didn't see Martha anywhere. And so then Adam said, please do me a favor. He goes, I'd like to, you know, he goes, hey, you're talking to a bottomless dummy. And then they had a laugh about that. And he said, all right. He goes, don't worry, Martha won't mind. He goes, she just said, watch the stuff. She never said, don't touch it. And then Barry said, yeah, you're right about that. Why would be? So then he goes, there's a little flap. It's a cardboard box, big cardboard box, about the size of a washer and dryer on its side with a flap cut into it. And it says, do not open. And then he pulls it open and there's this sleeping lion. It's not a real lion, though. It's a giant plush lion head. But it sounds like it's sleeping. So, and Barry Paul, he goes, is this lion gonna scare me? Is this, you know, are you playing? And Adam said, no. Well, we do that joke for kids because kids like to be scared, but no. And he said, hey, Martha, give him, you know, he goes, hey, give him my bottom. And then the lion lifts its head up. It's clearly a puppet. And then it lets its head out and it drops the bottom into Barry's hands. And then it licks Barry's face. And then Barry says, this is probably he goes, and I've lived an odd life. He goes, this might be the most oddest afternoon of my life. And Adam said, well, stick around for the show. It starts in 15 minutes. And then Martha started to giggle and control because she was inside the line, or at least her arm was, and she was hiding behind the box. And then she came around and she laughed and she and she had this wonderful smile on her face that immediately Barry was taken with as a professional entertainer and as a, you know, as a human being, we'll say. And his breath was taken away and he was holding the bottom half of a ventriloquist dummy. And he said, wow, he goes, he goes, it was you all the time. And then Adam goes, it was us all the time. And he goes, is that your thing? He goes, is that and she goes, no. She goes, here, give me his bag. She goes, no, I just having fun. I'm I don't live facetiously through Adam. He is my friend. And she goes, it is a relationship. And she goes, now you have to buy me a tea because I didn't scare you. And Barry said, well, geez, I'd like to buy you like dinner or something. Because I'm trying to come up with this idea where things are different and this is so different. He goes, so you have a ventriloquist act. And she goes, it's a show. And he goes, okay, because I don't want to quibble. And then Barry said, quibble. And then he just laughed. And then Adam, excuse me. And Barry said, geez, he goes, I've been searching and he goes, I want to start a circus that's different than everything else out there. That's a show. And he goes, it just seems like you're doing something so different right here. He goes, it's just so cool. She goes, well, you haven't even seen the show yet. He goes, I feed, she goes, see, he's got his lion tamer's outfit, Adam. And she goes, I got a whole thing with the lion, and then he saves all the children. And he goes, you're kidding me. And he goes, no, it's a lie. She goes, this is a circus-based show. So funny you stopped by. And he goes, well, I heard the lion roaring. And I had to rush over here, after panicking for a few seconds. And she goes, and then Adam goes, you're just like me. And he goes, well, I'm not as brave as you, Adam. And he goes, well, I'm not, he goes, it's just an act. And then Martha laughs again. And he goes, I didn't catch why your name's Martha Mark. And she said, well, 2 reasons. One, my parents thought I was a boy when I was first born. Don't ask. And he goes, you are, she goes, it was just she goes, don't worry, it wasn't anything. And she goes, and my dad also liked Marky Mark. So he thought it'd be funny if he called me Martha Mark. And he goes, well, how did they make that mistake if it's, and she said, well, I was born at a pub at 3 a.m. and everyone was drunk. So that's why. He goes, whoa. And she goes, yeah, that's my family. She goes, that's why I had to, reinvent myself as a ventriloquist, And he goes, oh, yeah. Because we're just trying to process all this emotional trauma through our circus arts. And he goes, you're an artist, Martha, and I want to work with you. And I'd like to have dinner with you and just talk about, if we could work together. And I've just been searching my whole life to find something like this, and I didn't even know this was what I was looking for, you know what I mean? And she said, well, she goes, I think you're overblowing it. You just happen to turn the right corner at the right time. And she goes, you want to work the lion for the act. Do you think you can not screw that up? And Barry said, well, I might, no. And she goes, well, you could just work the boombox then. Could you do that? And he goes, yeah. And she goes, you just gotta press play when the show starts. It plays all the music. She goes, I already have it looped. So, and he said, well, she's sick, and then we'll have dinner. And now this was the start of, obviously, it's clear, maybe, of a love story between Martha and Barry. And that love story would be what was formed, the Purple People's, whatever it was called, the circus, the Purple People's Circus, that would eventually find its way through shows like that twisted, but in a more concrete, audience-pleasing, no, I guess that's the wrong way to put it, but in a kind of concrete way that twisted the audience's expectations around. Because what Martha didn't say was that, geez, it was this circus act with a box, and Adam was a lion tamer, and Martha was in the act, and she was someone she was an inspector, and she was saying, the act kind of went like this. So she said, Adam said, ladies and gentlemen, I'm so proud to present my lion taming act and to bring my lion taming act to London. There'd be music, and they say, inside this cage is the most, you go on the whole thing. And on the African savannah, the king of the jungle And then he would do this thing where he'd say, oh, geez, in the most of the prey, Adam would even kind of stand up in his seat, and his chair was like one of those lion tails, and every once in a while the lion's paw would come out and swipe. And, and he'd say, just like you children, the exact same size. And then they had even a little sheep just a little sheep puppet. They think that was a marionette. Yeah, because Martha, I can see her, she's standing. And then the lion would sweep that. And it was the same size as most of the kids right in. He said, kids, move up a little closer after the sheep got pulled in. And then Martha would become part of the show, and she was an inspector. And she'd say, what is she? She would pretend she was a real London inspector, like a bureaucrat, actually. That was part of the show. And she'd say, what is the meaning of this? And she would ask the children. That's always a good gimmick. Or maybe not a gimmick, but she'd say, she would ignore Adam for a while in his authority, even though and she'd say, what is the meaning of all this? What are you children gathered around? And then she would back up, and then the lion would be swiping at her back. But Adam would be actually trying to defend her and get the lion back in. And then the children would be pointing, there's a lion, there's a lion. She'd say, what? Playing the dumb adult authority figure. And she would be like, what is the meaning of all of this? And then she'd say, what do you say? Are you lying? Then there'd be that, the Abbott and Costello, who's lying about what? And they'd say, every once in a while, he's lying about the lion. And then, she had a thing, and she'd say, what is your, and she'd start taking down, names. And then it would come out, finally, it would become clear. She'd say, what do you have that outfit on? What are you doing with that chair? Holding that chair? What are you poking at that box? What is the meaning? We needed this box. Do you have a permit for a box here? And he said, is it my understanding these children are gathered here for a show? Do you have your busker permit? And then it would come out that Adam was like an unlicensed marionette, whatever, ventriloquist dummy. And then she'd say, haven't you heard of the City of London Ventriloquist Dummy Act? That you're, and that'd be the kind of, she'd actually hurt his feelings, a little bit. But then he would say, oh, okay, well, I'm not trying to be, she's my, and he would tell a story. Then he'd try to win her back. This is Adam and Martha. But then it would come out about the lion. And then Martha was also, she'd say this, she could be really mad that she just one, that he doesn't have a permit. Two, she doesn't like the lion being in a show, even though, it's a joke, it's not real. And so they would double it, and she'd start going up with the fines. And this was also an intelligent way that because then Adam would say, does anybody have any money? Because she's starting to find me. So they would start the donations early, or get some donations in the back. Come on. And he would hand the hat out. And then it got a little Ghostbustery. I didn't want to throw them under the bus, but then she would say, I demand you open this cage, and I can see the state of this poor lion. And he'd be like, no, this is, you can't open the, do not open thing. And then, they would go back and forth, and then the lion would get fierce, and it was growling. And then Adam would defend, then Adam was defending her, and then she would escape and kind of run away in fear, like a anti-bureaucratic thing, I guess, and leave her, what do you call that thing? Check, whatever that thing's called. I know I just used the word, but clipboard, and then he would use the clipboard, and then the lion would come, and then he'd be trying to defend the children. And then I think the twist was that then he'd be like exhausted. And he'd be like, what is the, and then the lion would say, you promised me 2 steaks. And that was kind of the punchline of the show, not to ruin it. But then he'd say, 2 steaks, that's what I got for legs. And then he'd pull up his pants because his wooden legs, And then I think he would do a little monologue. And then the lion would say, it's the children, the steaks. And they'd say, okay. And then he would throw his waist into the line. He'd say, well, can I keep me in the line? Say, yeah, go ahead, keep your top half. And then, I think there's a little more drama in there in the middle. But then that was the show. And that was the show that won Barry's heart. And I don't know what won Martha's heart, maybe that he was kind of interacting with Adam as an equal. And, he had his own things, but that I guess would be another story, But this was a story, I guess, of two things, like a woman who had the vision, to reinvent the ventriloquist dummy in kind of a familiar way, and a man who would fall in love with that woman, but in a ventriloquist dummy that brought two people together that would form a circus, still finding its way. And maybe it'll find its way into another one of our stories again one day. But thank you and good night. All right. Everybody, this is Scoots with a Talk You In message from someone who supports the show. And here's what it comes down to. If you're listening to me right now, do you listen to Sleep With Me on a regular basis? If the answer is no, don't worry about anything I'm going to say after this. Can you afford to support the show back at like $10, 27, 10, $20 a month? If it's no, or if you don't have something like a subscription, you say, do I even use that? And that costs like $10 a month. I could be giving that to Sleep With Me. That makes my life better. But that's all it comes down to. Like, do you listen to Sleep With Me on a regular basis? Do you listen all night? If you listen all night, it can't be more critical that I get your attention. But yeah, if you listen to 2, 3, 4 episodes a week, like 10 episodes a month, the podcast actually makes your life better, and you count on the podcast. I got to tell you, we count on you to support the show back if you count on the podcast. People that just like listen casually, they don't count on the podcast like you do. And those are the people we need to support. We need to support the show back. We count on them. We count on listeners like you. So I'm going to read something from somebody that counts on the podcast and that supports the show back. But yeah, if all that is true, if Sleep With Me makes your life better, help us keep making your life better and support the show at sleepwithmepodcast.com/plus. And this is Natalie from Ireland. I've been a supporter since 2017 or 18. I don't even remember how long it's been. I chose to support Sleep With Me because Scooter helped take my mind off the day's stressors. And something spoke to me about the creativity of the show. And I felt as a working artist, Scoot's art should be supported so others can listen when they need something to take their mind off of whatever they're feeling. So thank you, Natalie, for supporting the show. And I really appreciate it if you relate to what Natalie said. Think about supporting the show back at sleepwithmepodcast.com/plus.